This is part 2 of the tutorial, How to Machine Knit the Everything Sweater. In it, we will knit the back and bodice sections of the sweater all in one piece. But first, a quick recap. In part 1, we took the one measurement required to make the sweater, chose the yarn we wanted to use, knit our swatches to determine the gauge, and finally calculated the magic number. Plus, we learned all about the extras included in the companion pattern. Follow the link in the description below to download the pattern from twistedyarns.com. Time to knit! So I've just cast on my 56 stitches. I'm going to clip this end down too. And if you need to, I found that I like to add a little bit of weight to this particular main color. It knits very neatly then, just a little bit of weight, not too much. And now, just so you're aware, my carriage is set to tension 9 because that's the tension of my swatch, and that matches what I'm making. My carriage is set on knit. This is important, that it knits in both directions. And I've just threaded up my carriage. And I'm going to knit across, and I'm going to knit 56 rows. How easy is that? And that's it. I'll see you then. So I have my 56 rows. Isn't that convenient? 56 needles, 56 rows. Then I've threaded up with scrap yarn, and I'm just going to knit a couple of rows, probably about 8 or 9, because I'm going to leave it open. Take my weights off before everything drops. Take my cast on comb off. But before I knit the last row of scrap and drop off the machine, I want to mark. I'm going to place 2 markers on this row, one on either side of 0. Since I centered I have 28 to the left and 28 to the right, then my 2 needles opposite the 0 mark are my 2 center needles. And I'm going to put a marker on the last stitch of each one on my main yarn. This is important, you'll see later, but do that now. You can do it if you take this off. You can put those markers on, but you actually have to count all the stitches. It's a lot easier letting the machine do the counting for you. Okay, so I'm knitting across. That's my last row. And now my back is off the machine. Doesn't that look sweet? Once again, I've just taken off my back, and so my needles, my 56 needles, are in work position yet. So I'm just going to, with the empty carriage, I want to have my carriage on the right, so I'm just going to move it over there. Then, 56, we're starting the main part of the sweater. So I'm going to just take every other needle out of work because I'm going to cast on with my scrap yarn again, just like I did before. So I'm going to one pass across, hang my cast on comb. I have to be real fussy about it because it doesn't matter. Move my stitches, the rest of the stitches for my 56 into work, and knit across the back. All right. Hold that down, knit 2 more rows. All I want to do is get some scrap yarn on here. Okay, perfect. And I can cut this now. And we'll save this for later because I will be using the scrap yarn again later. Okay, so there we go. And I'll be adding some weights. I like these weights because I can move them around, and we're going to be beginning to short row in a few minutes. Okay, so our work is on. I'm going to set my row counter back to 0, 0, 0. I need that. It's important throughout this pattern, and I'll tell you when, but to reset this. Okay, so we're threading up with our main color. Now, I want to leave about 3 lengths of my stitches because this part I will need later to do the finishing. Okay, so here's my place where I want to start, and I'll put a clothespin on it to mark it for just a minute. But I hate this stuff hanging out here, so I'm going to wind her up. So we're going to knit 1 row across. We're still at 9, that's our main tension, and 1 row to bring my carriage over there. This edge is the back of the collar. So what we're going to do is we're going to join the back of the collar to the back all at the same time. It saves you a lot of sewing in the last bit. So we're going to pick up this marked stitch to the right. Our knit is facing the machine. The knit side is facing the machine. We're going to pick up that first stitch and hang it on the end needle. Okay, I can pull this all the way out to hold and knit 1 row. Then, row 2, I'm going to pick up the next stitch and knit 1 row. Depending on your yarn, you need to pull that needle out, that's okay. Pick up the next stitch, put it on the same last needle, and knit 1 row. Now, before I go on, I'm going to zoom in and show you what that looks like close up. With my eyelet tool, I'm picking up the next stitch, the next loop of the next stitch, and placing on that needle. I'm pulling that one out so I can help it along because I have 2 strands of yarn, or 2 stitches on that needle right now. Let's do it again. It's really easy. Just put it on the needle. Now, as you do more of it, I was doing it in slow motion, but you can just pull the needle all the way out, and that saves you that extra second motion. Now, I'm going to do that all the way until I have 28 rows. So, 1 more for good measure. Okay, I'm down to, I have 28 on my row counter, and I have 1 more stitch to add because I had 28 along this side. I'm going to hang that last stitch like that. I am going to pull the needle out to help it along, and I'm going to knit 1 more row. But what that also does is it positions my carriage to the left, because on the next row we are going to begin short rowing. Okay, this is actually the back of the collar. We have just joined the back to the back of the collar on this side. At this point, this is the point of the shoulder. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start putting stitches out of work on this side. So the first thing you do is you change on your carriage, you change it to hold position. And so I'm going to bring 1 needle out hold position on this end. And because we're going to be short rowing, I like to keep my stitch holders available, and I like these in particular because they can move around. Okay, so because this is the shoulder, it's going to form a hole. So at the shoulder, I'm going to wrap that one stitch, and then I'm going to knit back. Because I do not want to have a hole right at the shoulder. But from then on, I'm going to pull a stitch into hold and knit 2 rows. Another stitch into hold and knit 2 rows. Another stitch into hold and knit 2 rows. Now, because this side is not lengthening evenly, we have to keep moving our weights. Plus, I like to put a weight right up under there. Now, let's say I got distracted, which often happens, and I need to determine whether I have put the last stitch into hold or not. If you look right here, you can see that the last row knit included this stitch, and my carriage is on the left. It did not include this stitch, so this one was the last held stitch. This one is going to be the next held stitch, so I know to move my needle into hold. We're going to continue to put a stitch into hold and knit 2 rows until we get to 2 stitches remaining that are in work. And I'll meet up with you then. Okay, so I've just brought my carriage across and I have 3 stitches remaining. So this is where I'm pulling 1 into hold. And I'm going to knit 2 more rows. And that's only on these last 2 stitches. But because I want this to form a little point, I'm going to knit 4 more rows. So let's just take our weight off, and you see how it has made this nice little turn. Okay, so now we are going to begin the opposite. We're going to start putting needles back into work position. So we're going to move the next needle into upper work position. You don't want to push it all the way back to work position, because then the stitch will fall, it'll close the latch and the stitch will fall off the hook. So you want to bring it to upper work position and let your carriage move it and knit it properly. So we've moved 1 in, and now we're going to knit 2 rows. Bring 1 back into upper work and knit 2 rows. 1 into upper work, 2 rows. 1 into upper work, 2 rows. Boy, was I lucky. I ran out of yarn on the left edge, and that's exactly where I'd want to be. If I had run out of yarn over on the right edge, I would have backed off a row. And the reason is this edge will roll just slightly, and you can weave that end in very neatly and never be seen again. If you're doing the tapering or the short rowing part and you have your yarn end on this side, there's nowhere to bury the yarn. It's kind of boring, because all I'm going to do is move this stitch back into upper work and knit across and knit back. Now my last stitch has a wrap stitch on it, which is just fine. Just move it into upper work and knit across. You're going to end on this side for this particular part. And guess what we're going to do? we're going to knit the side of the sweater. So we're going to knit 56 rows. Could you believe it? So, I'll meet you when I get to 56. Knit my 56 rows. And there's my little change of yarn there. And if you notice, this is starting to look like a side. See, this is the side of the sweater. And here is the side of the back. And so we're building an armhole in here. Now that we've done our 56, it's time to shape the bottom of the sweater. So, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to knit one more row to bring my carriage to the left. And then I'm going to begin short rowing for the bottom of the one side of the sweater. 2 in hold position, knit 2 rows. And we don't have to worry about wrapping this one because this is a design feature, okay? So we want the hole. You could make this sweater without holes, and I've done that too. But for this exercise, we're going to do 2 out of in hold, 2 more, and knit 2 rows. I'll meet you when we have 10 stitches left on the far end. Needles still in work position. And I can stop here, but then, but I'm not. I'm going to go to 8 stitches across. And now that these 9 and 10 are in hold position, I'm going to just knit 8 rows across these needles. If you wanted to, that's my 8, make sure they knit off, but what that allows is it helps turn the corner. If you wanted to do more, like 10, then you would knit 10 rows because you'd have to go further on this edge to turn that corner. So at this point, we're going to begin to put our needles back into work, but actually upper work position. And knit 2 rows. Just putting my last 2 needles into work, and using my 2 rows. Okay, that's my 2 rows. Where this last eyelet is on this thing is the corner. So we are just beginning to go across the back. And so we want to make sure we're going to hang the back, and this is the back, the bottom edge of the back. We're going to hang that to seam it at the same time. So what we're going to do is the first stitch is actually a half stitch. So we're going to ignore that, and we're going to pick up the first loop. And we are going to put it on the end needle. Sound familiar? Just like we did before. Now I'm going to put a clothespin on that stitch so that it doesn't loosen up the stitches along the edge of the back. But that's our first stitch, and then we're going to knit 1 row. Then we're going to hang the next stitch on that same needle. You can always bring it out to hold, except if you do that, you got to take your carriage out of, because we're not holding any stitches anymore. the third one. Ooh, it's going to be a tight one. And we just made it. Yay. Oh, that's ugly on that end. Ooh. It's a good thing we finished. Now, as I mentioned before, if we were doing short rows, we would have pulled that out and brought it to the outer edge. But since this is going to be, there's a seam going to be here where the sleeve is, I can bury that real easily. There we go. You thread it up. And we're going to just continue on. And hang the stitch until we have all 56 stitches hung. So that's 56 rows. I'll meet up with you then. Okay, so we're at row 54 and we have 2 more rows, but we only have 1 more stitch. So because on the bottom of the edge you have a half stitch on each end, so we're going to put the last one on and knit across, and then we're going to find, because we want to make sure we have our 56 rows, we're going to find where that knot is right here. It's like a little knot, because otherwise that will be an open stitch when it's all said and done. So we're going to try and catch it. If you can't catch it, don't worry about it. Just knit another row. There we go. Now that one I'm definitely going to help along because it's tight. Okay, that brings us to our 56th row. That's our 56 rows across the bottom. So now we're at the other side of the front, and we're going to bring our carriage 1 more row over to the left, and we're going to be starting to, guess what? Short row again. And because it's the bottom at front edge on the other side, we're going to bring 2 out and knit 2 rows. Except that didn't work. So we will correct it. We're going to take these 2 stitches off. 1, 2, because I forgot to do that, because I'm holding now. Okay? So, and then I'm going to bring these out to hold position again and knit my 2nd row. And so hopefully that nothing gets hung up. There we go. It should just come across the top. There we go. That's my 2nd row. Now, and continue on. So there's always ways to fix things no matter what you do. 2 rows here. And it's time to adjust my weights. So I've just put my last 2 needles in the hold, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 needles out in work yet, and I'm going to leave those in work, but I'm going to, because I want to have a rounded corner this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to knit 8 rows on just these few stitches. So this is 1, 2, make sure they knit off, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I'm going to begin to put my needles back into work. What those extra 8 rows did, it allowed it to turn the corner. If you have 8 stitches, you go an extra 8 rows. You go 8 rows. If you have 10 stitches, you'd be better off if you went 10, because you have a bigger curve that you have to make. Okay, so now we're going to start putting our needles back So this time we're going 2 at a time. So 2 into upper work position, knit 2 rows. 2 into upper work, knit 2 rows. Make sure they knit off though. We've just done and just finished the bottom corner of the other side of the sweater. Now we're going to be coming up the side of the sweater. So knit, guess what? 56 rows. We're going to bring our carriage over to the left by knitting 1 row. And then we're going to start pulling 1 needle out into hold on the right hand side and then knitting 2 rows. But once again, we want, this is the shoulder. This is the point of the shoulder. So we're going to knit across and wrap that needle just to give that a little, the shoulder seam a little more support when we do it. And so we're going to knit our second row. Then, just like we did before, now if you wanted to, you could wrap a couple more coming down the shoulder. But I find that it's only necessary to do one. Just a reminder, when I pulled this third one out, I actually knit 2 and then I knit 4. So it's a total of 6 rows on this end. Okay, that round makes the little point. Move my weight over here and we commence going back, bringing 1 into work position every 2 rows. We just finished the last lapel. So now we're back to the back of the collar, which is what we're going to be knitting now. And that means we need to join our last portion of the back to the collar, just like we did at the very, very beginning. And remember those markers? That was the indicators. So that was the indicator of the center. So to start, we are going to hang the last stitch, and I'm locating it. There it is, right here. And we're hanging that on the last one on the right. Everything action item is done on the right. Okay? And we're going to knit a row. Just 1 row. Now, I'm going to put my lever into knit so that this will knit off, not hold. Then I'm going to the next one. The only trick to this is you just don't want to twist this piece at all. But you actually start in the corner and work to the center. Okay, that's 27. And guess what? I have exactly the right number, which means I put that collar in perfectly because my marker is on the last stitch. Perfect. So I'm going to knit that 28th row. And there we go. And I'm going to cut my yarn. I have plenty of yarn already set aside. And I'm going to thread my carriage with waste yarn. And I'm going to knit 2 scraps.
See how the back and bodice come off the machine in one piece? Leave the scrap yarn in place on the collar for now, but you can remove the scrap yarn at the top and bottom of the back section. As you do, check to make sure all the stitches are joined. Pay particular attention to the stitches near the corners. In the next video, we will knit the sleeves and complete the finishing. Please take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell to receive notifications of upcoming videos. Happy machine knitting!